Graphic, the CSDB logo, Excellence in Service, Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind, established 1874. Title, Learning from Adult Role Models Who Are Deaf or Hard of Hearing. Title, Nicholas, Part 2. Nicholas wearing a shirt and tie, standing outside in front of a stone building, communicating in sign language.
So CSDB and Gallaudet really prepared me for my future. So about 4 months, I was looking for a job, applied, sent in applications to a lot of different places. I got a job at Maryland School for the Deaf in Columbia, Maryland. As a para, I was a one-on-one with a student. But, that only lasted for 3 weeks because I had put in so many applications for places that I was contacted for an interview after I'd already accepted that job. And so I got the interview, was offered the job at Sorenson, and took that job at Sorenson Communication, and I've been there for 5 years. I started as an operations coordinator, and that means that I was responsible for scheduling interpreters, making sure payroll was right, if they need staff at that specific day, that specific time, that time frame, I would assign staff there and put an interpreter there. If it turns out we didn't need somebody that day, we're not that busy, releasing interpreters to go home. So it was a very dynamic job. And what I learned at CSDB and Gallaudet, I was able to apply to this new job. And so I worked there for 4 years, and then it was time for a change. And so a district operations manager position opened up, and so I took that opportunity and applied for it, kind of a leap of faith. And honestly, it wasn't at all what I expected. It required managing people. I had never had management experience before, and so it was a real learning experience for me. And now, it's my job to make people better, not just my own performance, making sure that they're doing well, training them. I was also in charge of hiring for different positions, so all those things, it was a growing process. As a deaf person, having technological supports in the workplace is critical. Working for Sorenson Communication, of course, they depend on technology. And they developed the VP1, VP2, a way for deaf people to communicate with hearing people through the VP for free. It's great. And so I'm working for that company. But, it's different as an employee compared to a customer. As a customer, you just push a button on the remote and the interpreter pops up. But as an employee, there are a few challenges that I faced. As the operations coordinator, it was a lot easier than what I'm doing right now. Because as operations coordinator, I use my first language, ASL. I use my first language with the interpreters. When they would sign with me, I would sign with them, and that was nice. And also the center director. So there's a center director and the operations coordinator. So they work very closely together. But, I was able to communicate with everybody on the team. At meetings, everybody's signing. Now, my direct supervisor, my boss, was hearing, and I would use an interpreter with my boss. But, in a 40-hour week, I probably use an interpreter 4 or 5 hours, 35 hours of ASL, compared to now as the district manager. I didn't realize that. I thought it would be the same. I'm not responsible for the interpreter's schedule anymore. Now I'm responsible for the operations manager who's responsible for the interpreters. And so of the 5 operations managers, only one is deaf, and she's moving to a new job. And so now I got to look for somebody else. And so, when I'm in those meetings, I do have an interpreter. If I need to make a call right now, I can't. I got to make sure an interpreter's available. And I can't go through VP because of confidentiality. We might be talking about that interpreter, talking about procedures that the interpreter doesn't need to know, the VRS interpreter. And so we have to go through executive interpreters from Salt Lake City who can interpret. But there are only 8 people, only 8 of them to serve maybe 1,000 deaf employees. I don't know. So it's a challenge, so I contact them, see if they have availability, and they let me know, no, maybe 3 o'clock, and so then I got to wait all day for that meeting and schedule that time and see if they're available and then call. And so that's one of the negatives. So my direct supervisor and all my peers, now they're all hearing. And so that means at team meetings, everybody's hearing. And so I do have an interpreter. And that's one area that I really have to advocate for myself as a deaf person. Sometimes as the conversation's going and it stops, the interpreter's delayed. And so I want to say something and I raise my hand, but the conversation has already started and moved on again. And so I have to make sure that I remind them, once the interpreter's done, I need a chance to say what I need to say. And that took a while because for hearing people, when they stop, they don't like the silence. And they want to say something immediately. And so I have to stop them and and let them know I need to see my interpreter first. And so I have to advocate and let them know that deaf people need a little more time. Or if we're doing a training, Excel or any kind of new software training, and I'll have to let the presenter know, please take the time as you're presenting, don't just talk and click all over the screen. If they're using a web page or something, and I'm trying to look at the interpreter and the web page and the interpreter, and I miss things. And so I asked the presenter, when you're finished talking, then you can show us what to do on the screen. Go back and forth between the two. They're learning, and that's good. But I can imagine for other deaf people, it could be a little bit tough because Sorenson is a communications company. They provide communication for deaf people, and that's a plus, but there are still some struggles. And so we have to continue being advocates for ourselves. Let them know what we need. And so that's really important. Don't be passive. If an interpreter is only available for an hour and you got to wait all day for that 1 hour. No, if you need an interpreter all day, you should request an all-day interpreter. You deserve it.
Photo, Nicholas with his arm around a woman in front of a Pike National Forest sign. Summit, Pikes Peak, 14,115 feet.
If you're a new parent to a deaf child, my biggest advice, it should be required, I think. As soon as this child's born and you leave the hospital, you should be looking for an ASL course to take. As the number one time for development is birth to 5. And if you put that off and say, oh, ASL course, I don't have the money, or, maybe I'm not sure how much they can hear right now, or we're considering cochlear implants, and then all that's fine. That's your decision. But you should consider taking an ASL course in the meantime so you can communicate with your child immediately. Because if you don't, if you don't gesture, if you don't do this, they're going to get behind. And then they go to preschool, and they're going to be behind their peers. And then they get into mainstream school and wonder, hey, why don't I know that? Why did I never learn that before? Well, they didn't have communication access when they were little. And so please, when your baby's identified as deaf, look for an ASL course to take. Being deaf, it doesn't mean the world's going to end. It's just another human who needs support. And we have those supports. Interpreters, we have laws that protect us. Encourage the kids to do whatever they want. They can become a lawyer, they can become a teacher, work with hearing people, work with deaf people. Just help them grow as a person, regardless of being deaf, as a person.
Title, Learning from Adult Role Models Who Are Deaf or Hard of Hearing. Graphic, the CSDB logo, Excellence in Service, Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind, established 1874. Learning, Thriving, Leading. 33 North Institute Street, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80903. 719-578-2100. www.csdb.org. This has been a production of CSDB Outreach Programs. Video production, Austin Belage, Deb Branch, Sean Levier. Captioning, Lori Wilson. Interpretation, Laura Ramos. Audio description, Jamie Cusimano.